Donald Trump campaigned on the fact that he was going to release the files. They had a bunch of these morons like Jack Posobiec with these binders in Washington, D.C., making them look like the clowns that they already are. And Pam Bondi said she was going to do this at the directive of Trump. And I think what really happened here, Adam, is that Pam Bondi showed Donald Trump what's in these files. She showed him that he's probably in these files. He's probably all over the files. Yep. And then they had no choice but to not release them. That's what I think happened here. I don't even think Donald Trump knew he was in there. And I think Pam Bondi, is acting as, that's another thing. Okay, how stupid some of these MAGA people are is they want to put all the blame on Pam Bondi. She's just doing what Donald Trump is telling her to do.
Yeah, see, when it comes to Pam Bondi showing the files to Donald Trump, I actually do agree. I think she showed the files to Trump. They realized his name was littered throughout it because of how close he is with Epstein. But I also think that can be true, and she also overpromised. So they've kept ramping up the amount of victims apparently, and ramping up the amount of videos they have, and they were trying to create this atmosphere where hey, your favorite A-list Hollywood celebrities might be on this list. So she overpromised, and then when they actually got down to the reality, they're like, wait a minute, there's no Tom Hanks here, but there is Donald Trump. So this is going to be gravely disappointing to the vast majority of MAGA. So I think they're kind of hoisted by their own petard in this scenario. They're just being screwed by their own conspiratorial rhetoric, which is funny.
And a few other moments I just want to bring up with you with this press conference that you're covering, of course. We learned that Donald Trump is now refusing to recommend a special prosecutor. MAGA the last couple of days were saying, he's going to get a special prosecutor. Well, we learned that's not going to happen. And, the question was asked, does Trump have any knowledge of what's in the files? And Levette doesn't say no. She says, not to my knowledge. What do you make of that?
I think that they're all kind of here's the thing. I've had a lot of friends reaching out to me hey, what's Trump's play here? Is he distracting us from something? What is he distracting us from here? And I'm I actually think they're just dumb. They don't know how to maneuver this. Caroline Leavitt didn't know what to say in that situation. Trump doesn't want to appoint a special counsel or special prosecutor because, of course, what would be uncovered would be very, very bad. In fact, they are actively firing the prosecutors who were involved in the Ghislaine and Epstein case. So it's quite the opposite of transparency.
Yeah, there's no question. It's the opposite of transparency. Apparently, Secretary Rubio has literally just officially announced that U.S. aid has ceased all operations. What are your thoughts on that?
That is wild. We saw both President Obama and former President Bush yesterday say in a statement that this was an atrocity, or that this was a travesty. Sorry, that was the word. They said it was abysmal. This could lead to lower estimates of 3 million deaths over the next decade. Upper estimates were 14 million extra deaths over the next decade. 14 million extra deaths. And that, in turn, goes to the U.S. doorstep. Here's the thing about USAID that I always say, and it's hard to explain sometimes, but when you're driving past the gas pump every day, that's a visible indicator of how things are going to most people. Okay, gas prices are up and down, but USAID isn't as much of a visible indicator, meaning just because it's thousands of miles away, people think it doesn't really affect me, but it does. These diseases that it would prevent end up at your doorstep years later. So even though you don't see the immediate return on USAID, gas prices going up or down, there is a return long term.
Unfortunately, we're just at the beginning here. Trump's been in office for about 5 months or so, and the future does not look too bright. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this big, beautiful bill, that at least that's what they call it. And then J.D. Vance today had to have the deciding vote. What do you make of these MAGA Republicans, Adam? You know well that 13, 14 million people could lose their health coverage, their Medicaid coverage. Yet Republicans keep blatantly lying what's in this bill, and it's in there. I mean, Mike Johnson lying about it, Donald Trump lying about it, a plethora of MAGA Republicans lying about it. What do you make of that?
It's pretty impressive how they're brazenly trying to pull the wool over the eyes of the American people, and it could backfire in the midterms if they pass it, when it seems like they pass it, and people begin to feel the effects. Because beyond the massive debt increase, which again is kind of one of those things like USAID, where we don't feel it right now in the immediate term. I won't feel it driving to work or school or whatever, but what people will feel is the massive slashing of Medicaid, the massive redistribution of wealth. There's massive cuts to green energy that will cause 830,000 jobs to be cut. Unions came out against that. We have, again, redistribution of wealth, likes of which we've never seen. Even changes to election integrity coupled with changings to housing and urban development, it all creates a pretty terrifying, terrible bill. And I think that Republicans are going to face the consequences of that.
I have to ask you this to start. I wanted to know what your thoughts were on the video and the press conference where Donald Trump is in front of these cages where many of these migrants will be. I would imagine many of them with no criminal history. To me, it's just a despicable time in our country right now. What do you make of that?
Yeah, obviously the display in and of itself is disgusting. I mean, they were gloating about how they set it up in like 2 or 3 weeks, which isn't a flex. That means it's not safe, it's not secure. But it also comes at a really critical time when we've seen ICE ramping up, when we see this big ugly bill they want to go from $3.4 billion a year towards ICE to like 45 or so billion dollars a year by 2029, meaning we are about to enter an ICE surveillance state, like an ICE detainment state that we've never seen the likes of before. So while all of that's happening, Trump has this quote unquote cute little alligator Alcatraz on the side, but it's not so cute because it's coming at a really critical time when literally ICE is targeting people at nail salons, targeting people in courthouses, like in courtrooms. So when people go to the court to follow the proper processes, ICE will be camping there waiting for them. And again, Trump thinks it's cute to have this alligator Alcatraz, but it's like, it's not. It's pretty insensitive and terrible.
Yeah, it's sickening. I agree with you, Adam. What do you make of that? I mean, they told us, Tom Homan, and they told us we're going to go after the violent criminals. That's our priority. When it appears as though the more people that ICE is gathering up are people with no criminal history at all.
Yeah, they lied. It's as simple as that. They lied about everything. They said they were going to end the war in Ukraine. Nope. It got worse. Russia's taken more territory. More wars have broken out. Trump struck Iran. They said they were going to help the working class, the middle class, the lower class. Nope. They pulled away social safety nets. And I think when it comes to their promise about immigration, Trump is probably, in my opinion, what seems like most of the reporting backs this, being dictated around a lot by Stephen Miller. Like Stephen Miller kind of creates the blueprint behind the scenes for what happens, and Trump just seems to be dragged along. I know that he has his own really, really disgusting views on immigration, but I've heard there are times when even Donald Trump told Stephen Miller to reel it back because this is bad optic.
The Wall Street Journal has a Tiffany reputation, pure perfection. So the question is, why would they fail in this instance, especially with the president and something that's so salacious?
Another big stooshy between Donald Trump and the Wall Street Journal. Now, the publisher of the Wall Street Journal says it has full confidence in its reporting, and this is in response to a lawsuit from Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump is suing the Wall Street Journal for $10 million in damages over a story alleging that he drew a picture of a naked woman in a sort of lewd birthday message to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, he describes this article as false, malicious, defamatory, fake news in capital letters in a Truth Social post last night. Now, the Wall Street Journal's publisher, Dow Jones, says it will vigorously defend any lawsuit. Let's listen to the Washington Bureau Chief, Damian Paletta.
We just have to follow the facts, make sure everything's truthful, get fair comment, make sure we incorporate all that. And then when we feel confident that everything is accurate, then we can go ahead and publish the story, because these stories are in the public interest. These stories are for readers. These stories are not for sources. And so even if someone threatens us or makes an allegation, we need to follow the facts, and that's what we did in this case.
Now, the Wall Street Journal is owned by the same parent company as the Times and Times Radio. Well, let's now speak with Anne Bremner, who's legal commentator and a former defence attorney in Seattle. Anne, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Good morning from Seattle.
Oh, lovely. What's it like? What's the weather like in Seattle?
It's kind of probably like, it's a little dreary. They say that our weather's a little bit like yours sometimes, but we've had glorious weather up until a couple days ago.
Yeah, so we're very in tune. We've synchronized with our weather. So, Anne, what's your take on this huge lawsuit?
Well, it was funny when you were talking earlier about a book about who's a genius, because, of course, Donald Trump thinks he is a genius. And I'm not denigrating him anyway. That's how he presents himself, and that's how he files these lawsuits, of which there have been many. So looking at this, truth is an absolute defense to a defamation, which is a libel case when it's written. And the question is, do they have that letter? Do they have that note? Do they have exactly that? Can they prove that he was the one that authored it or drew it or doodled it or whatever else? That's the question. And finally, in the United States, under U.S. versus Sullivan, a public figure like Donald Trump has to prove that they acted with actual malice, and that's a really high standard.
So, from what you're saying, is there? Do you think that the threshold is pretty high here?
Yeah. Yes. It usually it's reckless disregard for the truth in a defamation case. And defamation here is either libel, written, or slander, which is the oral word. But when you're a public figure, you have to prove. How do you prove actual malice? That the Wall Street Journal acted with malice in publishing this information. That's a really tough standard, and it's rarely met with public figures suing for defamation.
And another interesting piece of information in this sort of jigsaw is that Donald Trump said that he contacted Rupert Murdoch directly to try and get him to stop the publication of this story before it appeared. What do you read into the fact that Donald Trump tried to get this story stopped directly with Rupert Murdoch, and the fact that it was published anyway?
Well, I mean, he definitely was wielding his power, whether it's presidential or personal, with Mr. Murdoch or otherwise. But the fact is, there are some states where if you ask for a retraction early on and that's denied, then basically you've got some ability on proof of damages later. I mean, in other words, in some states, if you don't do that, then you can't get emotional distress damages later on. And it's only, I think, 4 jurisdictions. But I don't think that's what he was doing. I'm just saying that that's the only legal reason I can think of that he would go to him first. And obviously he was denied. And so the next question is, are they going to produce the note, or is it within these documents that everyone's looking for in the Epstein files, or does it exist at all? It's pretty specific, the information. It's hard to believe somebody made that up.
And it's also worth saying that, all quality newspapers, and the Wall Street Journal falls under that category. They don't just publish something and take a punt. They don't just sort of publish and then see how they go. There's a big legal team. There would have been a lot of work done, because lots of stories never make it into print because it doesn't clear a legal threshold, right?
Right. I mean, the Wall Street Journal has a Tiffany reputation, pure perfection. So the question is, why would they fail in this instance, especially with the president and something that's so salacious? So, he makes a big splash a lot, and he may withdraw the suit later. I mean, he comes out and says fake news, and he hopes that people say, yeah, right, that's all made up, and then he can move on.
Yeah,
that might be strategy.
Because, as you say, then it becomes kind of, it's away from a piece of evidence, and I suppose it's all down to this letter, isn't it? And it's worth saying that the Times itself has not seen the letter, even though the Wall Street Journal is owned by the same parent company as the Times, and of course us at Times Radio, but the Times has not seen this letter. Right. So obviously it's hinging on this. If it does go to court, it is going to hinge on this letter, isn't it?
Right. Either it exists or it doesn't. But then more importantly, did he write it or didn't he? And he says he never doodles, but they found doodles that he's done. There were some, I don't know how many people that had these notes for Epstein on his 50th birthday. Was he at an event for him at the time? I mean, obviously they knew each other. And finally, you look at that and say, well, why even make a big rhubarb about this? I mean, if he wrote it, and move on. But to sue the Wall Street Journal for something that's, a frivolous case, is not laudable. On the other hand, if he didn't write it, then he has certain rights, whether it's the president or he's, just a citizen on the street.
Yeah, I mean, the stakes are very high on this. Do you think it will get to court?
No, I don't think so. I think that he's the president right now. So does he have time to go into court on this? We'll probably go to court within about 18 months. I just don't see that happening. And in fact, there'll be a summary judgment filed by the lawyers for the Wall Street Journal, basically saying we're entitled to a judgment as a matter of law because there's no evidence of malice in this case.
And look, the other thing I presume is you were saying, he probably won't want to go to court on this. And if he does go to court, I mean, it's going to be pretty unseemly to see ask the president of the United States to be doodling or drawing pictures for the jury or all those kinds of things to prove whether he did or not write this letter.
Yeah, he has more important things to do right now in terms of, not spending time in court. He's got all these cases with universities and law firms, and he's busy, and so why would he want to do that? And when you file a defamation case, you open yourself up to discovery about your personal life. Does he really want that? I don't think so.
I mean, the other thing which his critics would say is that whenever people, I mean, obviously in this instance, it's him bringing the lawsuit. Other people have brought